Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life, a fresh start, a new chapter filled with hope, love, and the promise of something beautiful. For me, it was all of that, and yet, it came with an ache I still haven't shaken years later. My name is Emily. I'm 27 years old now, married to a man I love with all my heart. We've built a quiet, steady life together, the kind that feels like breathing after a storm. But 3 years ago, when we tied the knot, a piece of my heart stayed broken, a wound carved not by strangers but by my own sister. Pam is 3 years older than me. To our parents, she's always been the golden one. Ever since we were kids, she could do no wrong. She made honor roll. They hung the certificate in the hallway. I won a regional art contest. It went in a drawer. I stopped trying to compete a long time ago. I just accepted that I was the other daughter, the one who learned to expect less. When I got engaged to Mark after 4 years of dating, I was overjoyed. We had saved up for a modest but meaningful wedding. Nothing extravagant, just love, vows, family, and close friends. I had always imagined my parents walking me down the aisle, my sister smiling in the front row, but that image was shattered before it ever had a chance to be real. Pam had just moved back in with my parents after separating from her husband. The divorce wasn't final, but the tension was high. I tried to be sensitive, to not brag or flaunt my engagement around her. I even offered to keep the wedding small and low-key so it wouldn't feel like a slap in the face. But it wasn't enough for her. She shouldn't get married while I'm going through a divorce. Pam told my parents, loud enough that I could hear from the next room. I still remember standing there, frozen, coffee cup in hand. My stomach dropped. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just trying to live my life, but somehow, me getting married became a personal attack on her. And my parents? They agreed. You should consider postponing the wedding, they told me gently one evening, just until Pam has had time to heal. It's just insensitive timing. Insensitive? I wanted to scream. I had waited patiently. I had been nothing but supportive during Pam's breakdowns and late-night crying fits. I even helped her move back into our parents' house. But now I was expected to shelve my happiness because she was hurting? I said no, quietly but firmly, and from that moment on, everything spiraled. Pam didn't just sulk, she retaliated. She reached out to cousins, aunts, uncles, whispering things like, "Can you believe Emily is doing this to me?" She made herself the victim. She made me the villain. The day I mailed my wedding invitations, I did it with shaking hands. I could feel the weight of betrayal already. One by one, the RSVPs came back. Most were polite declines. Some didn't even bother replying. I knew why. Pam had gotten to them. My own family had taken sides, and they didn't choose mine. By the time our wedding day arrived, I had already grieved the loss of my family. I tried to smile, tried to focus on Mark and the life we were about to begin. But even as I stood there in my white dress, holding his hands under the warm September sun, part of me felt abandoned. Pam didn't just stop at convincing our parents not to come. She escalated. When sympathy alone didn't turn enough people away from me, she resorted to lies. Some of the things she told people were so outrageous, they bordered on delusional. According to Pam, I had secretly manipulated her husband into divorcing her. She claimed I had whispered in his ear for months, telling him he'd be better off alone. That I had convinced him children weren't worth the sacrifice. That our generation was smarter for avoiding parenthood. I hadn't even spoken to the man more than a few times. We weren't friends. We were barely even acquaintances. If anything, Pam had made sure to keep me at a distance from him during their entire relationship. But her stories were so confidently told, so emotionally charged, that some people believed her. Others didn't need proof. All they needed was Pam's pain, wrapped up in tears and half-truths. The damage was done. One by one, invitations were declined. Aunts and uncles who had once babysat me, cousins I grew up chasing fireflies with, gone. All because my sister couldn't stand to see me happy. She painted me as a selfish traitor, and I had no defense. It was her word against mine. And with my parents backing her, my silence only seemed like guilt. I thought about calling them, just to plead my side, to explain how much it hurt that they believed her so easily. But every time I picked up the phone, my throat closed up. What was I going to say? Please love me the way you love Pam. That had been my silent wish since childhood, and it had never been granted. Why would it change now? Instead, I leaned on the people who chose me. Mark's family stepped in without hesitation. His mom helped me sew the final details on my dress. His dad took over handling the seating chart when I broke down in tears after crossing out yet another no-show. My best friend filled in as my maid of honor when my cousin ghosted me 2 weeks before the ceremony. The day itself was beautiful, in its own bittersweet way. I walked myself down the aisle. My hands trembled, but my steps were steady. I didn't cry, not then. I smiled. I said my vows. I kissed my husband. But that night, after the cake was cut and the guests were gone, I curled into Mark's arms and cried until my throat was raw. Not because the wedding was ruined. It wasn't. It was still one of the happiest days of my life. I cried because my own sister made sure it would never be whole. I cried because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, my parents, my family, chose her lies over my truth. And I cried because part of me still hoped they'd change, that someday they'd realize what they did. But that day never came. Instead, 3 years later, they came back into my life, not with apologies, not with remorse, but with a horrifying request. They wanted my baby to have 2 mothers. 3 years had passed since Pam destroyed my wedding and smeared my name across our family. In that time, I'd learned to live without them. Mark and I had built something quiet and solid, love without conditions, a home filled with laughter and peace. I was 27 now, in my second trimester of pregnancy, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Then the call came. It was my parents. Their voices, which I hadn't heard in over 1,000 days, were suddenly warm, polite, even cheerful, like nothing had happened. They congratulated me on the pregnancy, news they had, of course, learned through social media. There was no apology, no mention of the years of silence, just this eerie, artificial sweetness. And then came the real reason for the call. Pam, they said, was struggling. She had failed multiple rounds of IVF. She wasn't considering adoption or surrogacy. She still wanted to be a mother, and now that I was expecting, they had an idea. A beautiful idea, they called it. They wanted my baby to have 2 mothers. Pam would help me raise my child, be involved in every part of their life, and in return, she'd get to experience motherhood, even if not biologically. My parents pitched it like a favor, a blessing for me too. More help, they said, more support. It was a nightmare dressed up as a family reunion. I was so stunned I couldn't speak at first. My hand instinctively went to my belly, as if I could shield my unborn child from the absurdity. I asked them plainly, "Are you suggesting that my sister, who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, who sabotaged my wedding and turned half the family against me, now co-parent my baby?" They didn't even flinch. "She's just offering her love," they said. "It would be good for everyone. You're going to need help, and this could bring the family together again." That's when something inside me cracked. I told them this wasn't about love. It was about guilt. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because Pam wanted a child and saw mine as her second chance. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a vessel, a means to patch over their broken golden child with someone else's baby. I told them no, firmly, unequivocally, and when they kept pressing, I said something I knew I couldn't take back. I told them maybe Pam couldn't have children because the universe knew she wouldn't make a good mother. The silence on the other end was deafening. Within hours, my phone was flooded. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some furious, some guilt-tripping, some begging me to apologize. They said I was cruel, that I'd gone too far, that I should never kick someone when they're already down. But none of them remembered how Pam had stomped on me when I was supposed to be walking down the aisle. They didn't remember the lies, the humiliation, the loneliness I felt on what should have been the happiest day of my life. So no, I didn't apologize, because the truth is, I meant every word. After the call with my parents and that wave of messages telling me I was cruel for what I said about Pam, I should have been heartbroken. But instead, I felt something closer to relief, like a wound finally scabbing over. Still, there was a part of me that wrestled with the weight of what I'd said. Was I wrong? Was I bitter? Then came the moment that silenced every trace of doubt. Mark and I ran into Pam's ex-husband, Dave, about a year after the wedding. It was at a casual lunch spot not far from our home. He was there with coworkers. I almost didn't recognize him until he looked our way and smiled. A genuine, awkward smile like someone who didn't expect to see you, but didn't want to be rude. He came over to our table, said congratulations on the baby, and apologized for missing our wedding. Pam was going through a lot, he said. I remember Mark glancing at me, his eyes saying, "Should we say something?" But before either of us could respond, Dave asked something that made my stomach twist. "Wait, she didn't go to your wedding either?" He looked visibly confused. That was the moment the truth began unraveling. We sat together for nearly an hour, piecing together our side of the story with his. And it turned out Pam had played everyone, him included. She had postponed divorce mediation sessions multiple times, using my wedding as an excuse. Told him she was emotionally wrecked from the betrayal of her sister marrying while she was getting divorced. Made it seem like she was overwhelmed trying to prepare for my wedding. Dave hadn't thought much of it then. Just assumed she didn't want to deal with the confrontation. But hearing that she never even showed up, that she spread rumors about me, that she turned our family against me, that clearly shocked him. Then he told us something we didn't expect. After months of fighting about having children, Dave had finally started to come around. He was ready to revisit the idea of starting a family to meet her halfway. When he brought it up to Pam, she seemed thrilled. But then, like it was a joke, she said, "You would have had to come around eventually anyway. I stopped taking my birth control months ago." She admitted it, casually, like it was funny. She had been trying to get pregnant without his knowledge, tricking him into fatherhood, and that was it. That was the moment he decided to end things. Not because she wanted kids, but because she was willing to betray him in the most personal, violating way. My chest ached as I listened, not just for him, but for myself, for everything I'd carried alone. All the years I was made to feel like I was the problem, that I was too cold for cutting off contact, that I overreacted to what Pam did to me. Now I knew the truth. She hadn't just been cruel. She'd been calculated. She'd lied about me, lied to her husband, manipulated everyone in her orbit, and when it all fell apart, she used my pregnancy as her ticket back into the spotlight. I could have told the whole family right then, shouted it from the rooftops, but I didn't. I chose peace. I chose my baby, because sometimes healing doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from walking away with your head held high, even when the people who hurt you are still pretending they didn't. A few months after that lunch with Dave, life started to settle into a gentle rhythm again. My husband Mark and I were preparing the nursery. Baby kicks were becoming more frequent. And despite everything Pam and my parents had put me through, I finally began to feel something that had been foreign to me for years. Peace. That was until the second wave hit. It started subtly, a few distant relatives liking my pregnancy photos on Facebook. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since the wedding sent a heart emoji under a baby bump update. Then came the messages. "My mom said your parents are talking about making peace. Pam's been asking around for your number again." It was like the calm before a storm I knew all too well. And then the email came. Subject line, "Let's talk, for real this time." The message was from Pam. She said she wanted to put things behind us, that life's too short for grudges, and that she'd had time to reflect. She ended it with a single sentence that undid any goodwill she was trying to build. "I hope we can be close again, for the baby's sake." There it was again, that subtle shift of narrative. Not for my sake, not because she was sorry, but because my unborn child might benefit from her presence. That email was quickly followed by one from my parents. It wasn't much different. They said they'd made mistakes, but they were just trying to do what was best for the family. And like Pam, they brought up the baby. They said it might be good to have two mothers. That line, two mothers. I nearly dropped my phone reading it, the way they tried to sugarcoat what they really wanted. Access, a do-over, a child to claim, not love, not accountability, just a second chance at something they had no right to. I sat down and showed it all to Mark. He didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. Finally, he looked at me and said, "They didn't mention the wedding." "Not once. Not what they did to you. Not how they lied." He was right. Their apology didn't mention Pam sabotaging my wedding. They didn't bring up the rumors she spread or the damage she did to our family relationships. They didn't say sorry for the emotional weight I carried on my wedding day when I walked down the aisle in front of half-empty rows. Instead, they tried to frame it all as a misunderstanding, like they had just drifted apart from me, like they hadn't chosen sides years ago. It wasn't an apology, it was a performance. But the worst part? A small, guilty part of me still wondered, am I being too harsh? I thought about it all night, about Pam's lies, about my parents' absence, about holding back tears on what should have been the happiest day of my life. And then I thought about this baby inside me, growing stronger each day, about the world I wanted to build for them. And I knew, if I let these people back into my life, people who never took responsibility, who only showed up when they wanted something, I'd be teaching my child that love is conditional. That manipulation can be forgiven with a smile. That family means tolerating harm. I wasn't going to pass that legacy on, so I wrote them back, just 2 sentences. I'm glad you're finally reflecting, but this apology isn't for me. It's for your conscience, and I don't need it. Then I blocked them again. It had been almost 2 weeks since I sent that final message to Pam and my parents. No reply, no attempts to contact me again. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like relief. But then, the whispers started. A cousin messaged me late one night. Hey, just a heads up, your parents are telling everyone you're planning to give the baby up for adoption. That Pam is stepping in as a surrogate mom. I laughed at first. It was so ridiculous that I genuinely thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. Over the next few days, a few more people reached out, confused and concerned. One aunt asked me outright if I was struggling emotionally with the pregnancy and if I needed help. Another told me she heard Pam was already setting up a nursery. I was stunned, furious, heartbroken. They weren't just trying to force their way into my life. They were rewriting the narrative, again. They couldn't control me, so they tried to control how others saw me. My own parents were framing me as unstable, as unfit, as someone who needed rescuing, and the rescuer? Pam, of course, always Pam. This wasn't just a petty rumor. This was calculated. Mark held me as I sobbed that night, my hands instinctively resting on my stomach, as if I could somehow shield our unborn child from the ugliness of it all. I wasn't just mourning the loss of a relationship. I was mourning the illusion of ever having a real family in the first place. I had spent so long believing maybe I was the difficult one. Maybe I was the dramatic one. But this was cruelty. Deliberate. Unforgivable. I wanted to scream, to post the truth, to blast every detail across social media just like they had. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I needed to know where I stood, what rights I had, what protections I could put in place. I told her everything, how my sister had sabotaged my wedding, spread lies, and was now implying she'd be involved in raising my baby without my consent. The lawyer didn't even flinch. "You're not being paranoid," she said. "You're being smart." She helped me draft a letter, one I never thought I'd need, to my parents and Pam. It was clear, firm, and legally binding. It stated in no uncertain terms that none of them were to contact me, approach my child, or make decisions involving my family in any capacity. If they tried to show up at the hospital, law enforcement would be notified. It wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. When the letters were delivered, the silence returned. But this time, it felt different. It felt like I had drawn a line in the sand, and for once they didn't dare cross it. That weekend, Mark and I finished painting the nursery. Soft yellow walls, little clouds hand-painted above the crib. I put on some gentle music and we stood there, arms around each other, imagining the future. Our future. Not a perfect one, not without scars, but one free of the manipulative grip of people who had only ever shown me conditional love. I was done being the villain in their story. From now on, I was the protector in mine. It had been almost a month since I'd sent the cease and desist letters. No calls, no messages, no knocks on my door. And for a moment, I let myself believe it was over. That maybe finally they'd gotten the message. But peace, I've learned, is never permanent when your family refuses to let go of their version of the story. It started small. A mutual cousin posted a cryptic Facebook status, something like, "Some people forget blood is thicker than pride." It didn't mention names, but I knew exactly who it was aimed at. I scrolled past it. I didn't engage. Then came a message request from an old family friend I hadn't spoken to since my wedding. She said she'd heard I'd banned my grieving sister from seeing her only chance at feeling like a mother. I nearly dropped my phone. That phrase, her only chance at feeling like a mother, was word for word something my mom had said during our final phone call, which meant they were still talking, still spinning their web, and now they were dragging strangers into it. I broke down that night, not just from anger, but from grief. Real, raw, gut-wrenching grief. Because I realized that no matter how much distance I put between us, no matter how many legal walls I built, they would never stop trying to rewrite the narrative. Mark held me while I cried, rubbing slow circles on my back. "You don't have to keep letting them define you," he whispered. "You have a right to your truth." And so I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Pam's ex-husband. It had been over a year since that awkward lunch encounter, but he picked up immediately. "Hey," he said cautiously, "I've kind of been expecting this." I told him everything about the rumors, about the social media posts, about the lie they were telling now that Pam was going to help raise our baby. He let out a long, tired sigh. "They're really still doing this?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm exhausted." He was quiet for a moment, then said something I'll never forget. "You have my full permission to tell the truth about everything. If they want to lie about you to protect her, then it's only fair people know what really happened." I asked him if he was sure, if he was ready to deal with the fallout. His voice didn't waver. "I lived through her manipulation once. I won't let her use me again to manipulate someone else." So I did it. I wrote a post, just one, clear, calm, honest. I laid it all out, from the sabotage at my wedding to Pam's false accusations to the real reason her marriage ended. I didn't embellish, I didn't attack, I just told the truth. I didn't tag anyone, I didn't invite drama, but within hours, the post spread. Cousins messaged me, shocked. Aunts called to apologize. Even a few relatives who had once believed Pam reached out to say, "I didn't know, I'm so sorry." Pam and my parents? Silent, no apology, no attempt to clarify. And honestly, that said more than anything they could have written. For the first time, the weight of their narrative wasn't on my shoulders. It wasn't my word against theirs. The truth, raw, complicated, messy, was finally out in the open. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted to breathe. 4 days after I posted the truth, I got an email from my parents. The subject line read, "Let's move forward." I almost laughed. Not "we're sorry," not "we didn't know." Just "let's move forward," like they could skip the years of betrayal and leap straight into forgiveness. Like time and truth were optional. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I opened the email. It was long, way too long, and packed with flowery language. They told me how emotions were high back then, that everyone makes mistakes, and that they never intended for things to go so far. They didn't deny what I wrote. In fact, they barely addressed the content of the post at all. But what caught my attention, what truly made my stomach turn, was the line that read, "We're willing to apologize if you agree to take the post down and not speak about this again." There it was. The truth of it all. This wasn't about healing. It was about control. Mark read the email over my shoulder. "They're trying to bargain their way out of accountability," he muttered, shaking his head. I didn't reply. I couldn't. There's nothing to say to people who place conditions on remorse. Instead, I blocked their email. Again. But what I wasn't prepared for was the quiet. For 2 whole weeks, I heard nothing from them. Not even indirect jabs online. No cryptic Facebook statuses. No vague sympathy baiting from Pam. The silence was eerie, but in a way, peaceful. I started sleeping better. I began enjoying the pregnancy again, something I hadn't done in months. My baby shower was coming up, and my mother-in-law and friends were handling everything. I felt supported, loved, and finally, free. Until Pam broke the silence, she messaged me directly, through a new number. Her message was 2 paragraphs long and read more like a PR statement than anything sincere. She said she was deeply hurt by what I'd written, and that it had made her relive the trauma of her infertility. She said that while she regrets how things unfolded, she hoped I'd understand that grief makes people act irrationally. Then came the kicker. I think it would be best if we tried to move on, for the baby's sake. I'm still open to being involved in any capacity you'll allow. Just please don't shut me out. I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Not once did she apologize for spreading lies about me. Not once did she acknowledge the damage she caused on my wedding day. And still, she was asking to be part of my child's life, as if I'd forgotten who she was. It wasn't just a boundary issue anymore. It was a psychological game. Pam wanted access to my baby so she could soothe her own guilt. She wasn't coming from love, she was coming from loss. And while I can empathize with her pain, I won't let it cost me or my child peace. I showed the message to Mark. He didn't say anything right away. Then he asked, "Do you want her anywhere near our kid?" "No," I whispered without hesitation, not even once. And that was it. I drafted a final response. "Pam, I wish you peace, but you are not part of my life. This baby will not be your emotional crutch. Please don't contact me again." Then I blocked her permanently. I don't know what they'll try next, but I know one thing for certain. This child, my child, will grow up surrounded by love, not manipulation. I may have lost a sister, I may have lost parents, but what I've gained, truth, strength, family by choice, is worth far more. 2 weeks after I blocked Pam, the guilt hit harder than I expected. Not guilt over what I said to her, because frankly I still believe it, but guilt over how broken my family really is. I used to tell myself that maybe one day they'd come around. Maybe they'd own up to the damage, try to rebuild something real. But with every attempt they made to shift blame, to manipulate, to turn my baby into some twisted symbol of reconciliation, I knew that was a fantasy. And fantasies don't raise children. Truth does. That truth showed up again in the form of my cousin Natalie, who called me late one night, just a few days after I'd shut down contact with Pam and our parents. I almost didn't answer, but she's one of the few relatives who actually came to our wedding, who brought a gift and hugged me tight when my parents didn't show. So I picked up. Natalie didn't waste time. "Hey, I need to ask, did Pam really fake infertility to guilt your parents into contacting you?" I blinked. "Wait, what?" She told Grandma she never tried IVF, that she just said it to get them to soften toward you so they'd support her again. But then she got scared you might take her seriously. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only did Pam weaponize my pregnancy, but she had also lied about her infertility, just to play the victim more convincingly. And now, when it got too real, she was backpedaling? Natalie continued, "She's been melting down since you blocked her. She's telling people she's afraid you'll get the baby to hate her before it's even born." I almost laughed. Hate her? My child won't even know her. But that's what narcissists do, isn't it? They don't fear losing a relationship. They fear losing control of the narrative. That call with Natalie opened a floodgate. Messages from other relatives started rolling in. Aunts I hadn't heard from in years. Even my older cousin Dylan, who never gets involved in drama. They'd all seen the Facebook posts. They'd all read my side of the story. And now they were picking sides, not based on blood, but based on truth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being pushed out. Some of them apologized for not coming to the wedding. Some even admitted they believed Pam back then because she was just louder. That phrase stuck with me. Louder doesn't mean truer. Pam had always been the center of attention, the golden child. She knew how to twist a story until it sounded just right. And when you're the quiet one, the one who doesn't fight for the spotlight, it's easy to get cast as the villain in someone else's play. But now the script was changing. I wasn't yelling, I was finally being heard. I went for a walk that evening, just me and the little one kicking softly in my belly. The air smelled like jasmine, and for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before my wedding. Relief. This baby was never going to be raised in the shadow of fake apologies and manipulative love. Mark and I had built a home filled with warmth and honesty, and this time I was building boundaries as strong as brick. I won't lie, there's still hurt, deep, lingering wounds that might take years to fully heal. But the silence I once feared now feels like peace. 2 days after that night walk, just when I felt like the tide had finally calmed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a ring at the front door. Mark answered first. I heard him mumble something, followed by silence. Then, "Babe? It's them." I didn't need to ask who them meant. I walked to the door, heart pounding in my chest, and there they were, my parents, standing on our porch like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't skipped my wedding, like they hadn't tried to hand over my unborn baby to Pam as if it were some emotional consolation prize. They looked older than I remembered, worn out. My mother held a tray of something homemade, her signature olive oil cake. My dad stood there awkwardly, gripping his phone like it was a shield. "Can we come in?" My mom asked softly. I didn't answer right away. Mark gave me a look, a silent, "You don't have to do this if you don't want to." But part of me needed to know what they came to say, so I nodded once and stepped aside. They sat on the couch like strangers in a waiting room. My mom placed the tray on the table like it would somehow bridge the chasm between us. No one touched it. "We heard," my father finally spoke, "that you've been telling people things about Pam, about the wedding, the divorce things," I repeated coldly. He hesitated. "That she made up lies about you, that she sabotaged your wedding." "I didn't tell anything that wasn't true," I replied. "You know it. You were there. You chose her over me, repeatedly." My mother's eyes welled with tears, but I'd seen that performance before. I wasn't moved. "She's not well, sweetie," she whispered. "She's struggling, and now she's more alone than ever." I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. "And you think that gives her a pass? That lying about me, turning the whole family against me, trying to ruin my wedding, should be forgiven because now she can't have a baby?" They were silent. "What do you want?" I finally asked. "Because I know you didn't come here to apologize. If you had, you would have done it 3 years ago." My mom finally spoke again. "We want to be part of this baby's life. We miss you. We miss our daughter." "You have 2 daughters," I said. "You just spent your lives only loving one." It was quiet for a long time, and then I said something that surprised even me. "You can be grandparents. If you're willing to show up for real this time, not for Pam, not to fix her wounds, but because you actually want to be here for me, the daughter you pushed away." They both looked stunned. "I'm not asking for miracles," I added, "but if you ever try to manipulate this baby's place in our family again, or bring up the idea of 2 mothers, there will be no second chance." They nodded slowly. My father finally said, "We'll earn it if you let us." When they left, Mark put an arm around me. "That was brave," he whispered. "I'm not brave," I said, rubbing my belly gently. "I'm just done living like I owe anyone pieces of myself." For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. 3 weeks passed after that visit from my parents. Quiet weeks, no surprise visits, no texts from unknown numbers, no sudden emails asking me to reconsider letting Pam play aunt-turned-second mom. It was strange, like they had really taken my words to heart, or maybe they were just regrouping. My pregnancy was moving along, and with every flutter in my belly, I felt a deeper connection to the life I was growing. Mark painted the nursery in soft sage green and cream tones. I folded tiny onesies and stocked diapers in woven baskets. Every part of preparing for our child brought peace, until one afternoon it didn't. We were sitting on the couch, going through baby name books, one of my favorite things to do lately. That's when Mark pulled out a folded envelope he'd been hiding under the coffee table drawer. "I didn't want to ruin your mood," he said, "but this came in the mail yesterday. It's from Pam." I stared at it. "Why didn't you just throw it away?" "I didn't want to make that decision for you." I opened it. The letter was handwritten, blue ink, perfect cursive, signed with a heart next to her name like she was still 16. And it was the most twisted thing I'd read in a long time. Pam wrote that she'd been thinking a lot about our family, and while she acknowledged some past tension, she hoped we could start fresh with the new baby. She even offered to help name the baby, because she already felt a maternal connection. She included a short list of names and said they were chosen with love. One of them was the name I had secretly picked out for a daughter years ago, a name I had told her once back when we were barely civil. I felt like the air was sucked out of the room. She knew, I whispered. She remembered. Mark sat up straight. You told her that name before? Yeah, back when we were teenagers, when we used to talk about what we'd name our kids someday. She was obsessed with baby names. I guess she never forgot. My hands trembled as I read her note again, the casual way she tried to insert herself back into my life, as if she had any right to name my child, as if she could rewrite everything that happened just by playing pretend, set my blood boiling. This is a boundary violation, I said, voice shaking. She doesn't get to do this. Not after everything. Not after turning my wedding into a funeral and blaming me for the collapse of her life. Mark didn't say a word. He just gently took the letter, ripped it in half, and then again until it was nothing but tiny scraps. I know that name meant something to you, he said quietly. But maybe it's time to choose one that means something new. Something that isn't tied to her. I nodded. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a warm cup of tea and wrote the name I'd picked on a fresh page of my journal. One no one had ever heard, a name no one could twist or steal, a name that belonged only to this child, and to the version of me who had survived every betrayal to stand here now, still whole, still steady, and still capable of love. This baby would be born into my love story, not theirs. 2 months later, on a rainy spring morning, I gave birth to my daughter. She came into the world with a tiny cry and a full head of dark hair, just like mine. Mark cried harder than she did. I don't even know how to describe the feeling, this tiny human, part of me, part of him, resting on my chest. All the bitterness, all the hurt from the last few years. It didn't vanish, but for a moment it stepped aside. We named her Eliza. Not the name I once whispered in a teenage bedroom, not one stolen or suggested by anyone else. This name was born from quiet moments between Mark and me, from a place of healing and hope. Eliza, strong, gentle, ours. The hospital was calm and quiet. We had decided early on that no visitors were allowed. My in-laws respected that. My friends sent flowers and food, and for once, my phone didn't buzz with drama. But that silence didn't last long. 3 days after we brought Eliza home, a large bouquet of roses arrived on our porch. No card, just a small note tucked between petals. Welcome, baby. You are loved by more than you know. Mark and I looked at each other. She's trying again, I said. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. The next day, an email came in, my mother this time. No apologies, no accountability, just, we heard, we'd like to meet her. We're family after all. I stared at the screen, numb. After everything they did, everything they enabled, they still thought they had a claim. And then came the second part, an emotional plea from Pam herself. I want to be there for my niece. I know I messed up, but I don't want her to grow up not knowing me. She's my blood too. I could have screamed. I could have written back a long email listing everything Pam had done, every lie, every manipulation, every time she tried to ruin me because her life wasn't what she wanted it to be. But I didn't. Instead, I opened a clean page in Eliza's baby book and I wrote, "You will never be a pawn in anyone's pain. You are loved not because you fill a void, but because you are you. You don't owe anyone a piece of yourself to make them feel whole. That's a lesson your mom had to learn the hard way." I never responded to the messages. Mark backed me fully. My in-laws offered to screen visitors and handle any unexpected knock on the door. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of choosing peace over family. I wasn't the same girl who begged for love and attention from a family that only saw me when it was convenient. I had my own family now. Late one night, rocking Eliza to sleep, I thought about Pam's words. How she once said I didn't deserve happiness if she couldn't have hers. And I realized how broken a person has to be to believe that. I didn't hate her anymore. I pitied her. I hope she heals one day. I hope she becomes someone capable of love that doesn't come with strings or bitterness. But that healing won't happen through my daughter. I chose to break the cycle. I chose peace. I chose Eliza. And I would choose her every single time.